Hey guys, welcome back to an interesting video in Wild Rift. So today we are back with our patch rundown for patch 4.3a. But before we jump into patch 4.3a itself, let's quickly briefly talk about the hotfix to Lux and Soraka, which I didn't of course do a video to talk about because I didn't really want to do a video to just talk about two small changes. So real quickly, first up, Lux passive damage is base amount going down by a little bit, and the level is going to be times 8 instead of times 7. Times 7 instead of times 8, sorry. The AP ratio is the same. More or less, this shouldn't affect her damage too much. A little bit less damage, not too important. Cooldown of her W going up by 1 second, not too important again. But the part that actually is important is the shield base amounts are going down very significantly. So you can see here it's like 40 less at max rank, and over here it's like from 290 to like 168, which is like, this is like 130 less shield, which is a lot. And in compensation, you're getting more AP ratios. Now this is really funny because originally they put the base amount higher and they lowered the AP ratios because they didn't want Lux to build damage, they wanted Lux to build support. But people in China, of course, found a tank Lux build. So basically the tank Lux build involved going items like Frozen Heart, Frozen, what was it called? Iceborne Gauntlet, Spirit Visage, those kind of items. And going for those items basically gave you a lot of ability haste. And at the same time, it doesn't give you any AP, but lowers your cooldown by a lot. And you can spam your shield like every 2-3 seconds or so. And because the base amounts of the shield are so high, it becomes just ridiculous basically. So now they're giving her back her AP ratios and lowering her base amounts to of course prevent this tank build from becoming too rampant, but at the same time this is gonna bring back damage Lux again, like the full AP, like Luden's Death Cap, Infinity Orb kind of Lux, because you know you can't solve both problems at the same time. But overall Lux is still pretty strong, just not completely overpowered. Same goes for Soraka. Soraka is still really strong, just not completely overpowered. Her base armor is going down by 4, and her armor per level is also going down. Make her a little bit more vulnerable, especially to AD assassins. And her healing base amount is going down by pretty huge amounts. It's almost 25% less at max rank. However, the AP ratio is also going down from 70% to 55%. Now, why was this needed? Well, basically, Soraka used to go for, of course, the Warmock's armor as either her first or second item. So sometimes you could go for a build where you go for Relic Shield into Warmock's into Ruby Crystal to get Warmock's first item, or you could instead go for, like for example, Ancient Coin into Ardent Sensor into or not Ancient Coin, it used to be Spectral Sickle into Ardent Sensor into Warmox. But basically, Soraka used to need to build Warmox as a second item or first item to get the health, because she consumed her health while healing. Since she uses only mana now, this allows her to go for full-on support items as her first two items. So she can go for Ardent Sensor plus Staff of Flowing Water in any order, and this gives her a lot more AP than what she would have in previous patches. And basically, because of that, her healing becomes insane, of course, in addition to her healing being a lot in the first place. So lowering her AP ratios makes sense. It's going to bring her closer to what she was before the rework. But overall, as I mentioned, Lux and Soraka are still both really strong, and both still should not be underestimated. So anyways, with that out the way, let's jump into patch 4.3a. First thing we have is the new champion, Vladimir, coming out on 17th of August. So this champ is of course going to be like normally it's a top or mid laner, mid lane mage, focusing a lot on like lifesteal as well as more like DPS kind of damage instead of burst. But he does have quite a lot of burst with his E as well. Of course, we'll talk more about him when he comes out. And when he comes out, he's going to come together with our third trivia event. Of course, we had Kassadin, Urgot, and now we have Vladimir. Personally, I hate trivia events because I'm going to have to read through all the lore of the champion to get the questions correct. Of course, you can't really trust like Reddit or like other people's YouTube videos. At least I don't. So I'm going to have to read through all of the lore. So far, I've gotten all the questions correct for both Urgot and Kassadin, so hopefully we can do that for Vladimir as well. And yeah, hate these kind of events. So, first champion change. Annie is getting reworked. Firstly, she's getting lower health per level and armor per level to make her a little bit more vulnerable. Now, the main goal of this is they want her to be more focused around her Tibbers, her ultimate. So the focus is going to be less on yourself and more on your pet, so-called. So Molten Shield is getting a huge nerf. Instead of using the shield on yourself, Tibbers, or an ally, now it's only going to shield yourself and Tibbers. Now, it's not an or, it's an and. But I feel that a big reason why Annie shield is really good is because you can use it on allies, so you can be a little bit more supportive. But with this, basically Annie can never play as support. You probably should be playing her in the mid lane exclusively. But anyways, regardless, basically she's only going to be able to shield herself and Tibbers. The numbers are still the same, I believe, and now she's going to get movement speed as well. So the big change here is Tibbers. So Tibbers, of course, is going to get a slight nerf in terms of how long he stays on the map, because he's a lot stronger now. So he's only going to be on the map for 20 seconds. However, his AD is going up by like 20, 25, 30 at each alt rank. Still have 20% AP ratio. And he's going to enrage when he's just summoned, which is the same, when Annie dies, which is the same, or when he pounces on enemies, which is a new thing. So what happens when he pounces on enemies? Well, what they removed is he no longer has that AoE burn, which honestly was not very useful anyway, because people are not going to stand there and get burned by Tibbers. So 2 seconds after you ult, you can reactivate your ult to make Tibbers jump onto an enemy which deals magic damage. This is a pretty huge amount of magic damage. And of course, it's going to knock up the target for 1 second. Now take note that this is only single targets. If you send Tibbers into an entire enemy team, like when you reactivate it, it's only going to knock up the one guy that you chose, or the one guy that it auto-targeted. It's not going to knock up the whole enemy team. But this is pretty huge, because this basically reinvents the entire playstyle of Annie, because Annie now has, of course, the crowd control on her passive, and now she has an additional crowd control on her Tibbers. But as a result, she's of course losing certain things like her shield, some base stats, or not even base stats, is like scaling stats, and also it's just really different. So honestly, I can't really say what this is going to be like, so we're going to have to wait for it to release, and we're going to have to see what it's like. So Caitlyn traps are getting lowered cooldown. It's a lot lower cooldown at first rank, and then the cooldown just slowly scales back to like the same cooldown. So it's basically to help her early to mid game just a little bit. Honestly, I don't think this change is going to affect too much. I've never found the trap charging time to be a major issue, so I really don't think this matters at all. Now, Graves has been really weak in the jungle. I've lowered him in my tier list for the past couple of patches. He used to be pretty strong, but honestly now he just takes way too long to get to a point where he's powerful. So what they're doing to him is the second half of your end of the line is getting a bonus damage. That's when the bullet or whatever he shoots out comes back, the canister, getting 10% extra AD ratio. And his ult is getting 25 extra base damage at all ranks. Now I feel like these changes are really needed, because Graves is really weak at the moment. I might test him out and see if he's good. Maybe I'll make a video on him if it goes well. But I think that these changes are a step in the right direction. I don't think that they'll be enough to make him good, but we'll have to see. Now Gwen finally is getting a nerf in the jungle. So Gwen is now only going to do 80% damage to monsters with her Q. Her Hallowed Mist, however, which is the W, the ring around her, cooldown is going down at earlier ranks. Of course, this is the ability you max last, so this means that this cooldown change is going to be a lot more significant. And the bonus armor and magic resist she's getting is also increasing, so this is kind of increasing her survivability at the early game. Of course, this is to help her scale up into the late game a little bit more easily. But overall, I think these changes are not too big. I think it's just a good quality of life change for Gwen, because her early game is really weak, and this is just a slight, very slight buff to her early game, so it's probably not going to matter too much. Now, I can't believe that they're saying Lee Sin is weak, because I think Lee Sin is incredibly strong, but I guess because Riot buffs and nerfs based on win rates, there are a lot more bad Lee Sins than there are good ones. So anyways, Lee Sin's getting a buff. He's getting a 5% extra AD ratio on his Q. And when you reactivate your Q, it's getting 5 to 10% increase in damage as well. So this probably means Lee Sin's going to hurt more, and on the hands of a skilled Lee Sin player, he's going to be a monster. Leona getting base AD buff by 4, and her base and her attack per level is going from 1.7 to 3. That's nearly double. So of course it's going to help her do more damage, and also her ulti is getting a damage buff of 50 at all ranks, so a lot more damage coming out from Leona from her ulti, and of course as well as from just her basic attacks, I guess. So of course Leona hasn't been too strong, constantly near the bottom of my tier list, so this is definitely a step in the correct direction. It's going to help her out tremendously. Now Nyla, of course, getting completely abused in the lane. Base armor is going up by 3, and base health regen is going from 6 to 10, which is huge because base health regen is a very, very important stat for Nyla, because without it she can't sustain in lane, and she's just gonna get poked down. So we'll see if this is actually a good change or not. Now, the new thing is her Q now damage ratio to monsters is 60%. Now, this is because a lot of people have been playing Nyla jungle. I haven't tested it out myself. I was planning to, but may not be able to do that anymore, because 60% damage to monsters instead of 100% is pretty huge, so they're trying to nerf her out of the jungle. I'll have to test her clear and see if she still does alright, or what's the case here. Speaking of the jungle, Olaf, as I mentioned, has been really, really strong in the jungle for many, many patches. They're finally nerfing him, so his Q is now going to be doing 10 less damage in all ranks. His E is going to be doing 5 less damage in all ranks. Honestly, these changes are just so negligible. Like, doing 10 less damage and 5 less damage is like in like a single combo you're doing like 15 less damage, which like really, how is that even going to matter all that much anyway? So honestly, I think these changes are a little bit too small to be too impactful, but of course it again is a step in the correct direction. Speaking of which, Ornn they felt is doing too much damage, which I definitely agree with. Ornn can sometimes do as much damage as like his ADC in some matches. So what they're doing is they're cutting his base attack, his health per level as well. And of course, Bellow's Breath getting a second nerf 2 patches in a row. The max health percentage is once again going down by a lot in the early game, but a bit less in the later stages of the game. Of course, this is generally the ability you max first, so this is going to scale up pretty quickly. His E is now only the E damage is now going to be 40% of your bonus armor and magic resist instead of 50%, so definitely a step in the correct direction, because Ornn, one of the reasons why he's very strong is because of how much damage he does. Like, if he's tanky and does a lot of CC, that's reasonable, but the fact that he is so tanky, has so much CC, and he does like as much damage in the ADC is completely ridiculous. So this is definitely another step in the correct direction from the balanced team. Now, Rakan apparently has been flourishing with Nuance. Don't know about that. I haven't really played him. I haven't really played against him as well. I assume that they're talking about Glacial Augment, but his health is going down by 40, and also his shield on his E is going down by 10, which is pretty big in the early stages of the game. Like 45-35 is pretty big, but in the later stages, 150 to 140 is not that bad. So apparently Rakan is becoming strong again, so they're gonna have to cut him down to size. Now, Rammus, apparently it's been moving too fast around the map, so what they're doing is they're basically just lowering his base movement speed and just making the formula a lot more easily. This is like such a complicated formula. It's like 60 plus 90 divided by 14 times level minus 1. It's now like just 35 plus level times 2 bonus movement speed. So that's like a lot easier to stomach what's going on here. But anyways, aside from that, his defensive ball curl, his W, armor increase is going down by 5% at all ranks, so gonna get a little bit less armor from Rammus. I think that these changes are just like alright. Doesn't really change all that much, I believe. Samira needs a buff apparently, so her Q AD ratio going up by 5% in all ranks. Now 5% is a lot more than 5 damage like compared to Olaf, so 5% extra damage. Of course, in the later stages of the game, this is gonna be a notable change. And also, another huge change is her W. Her W cooldown at base rank is going from 30 to 26, and this is of course the ability you max last. So having it available more often is going to help Samira's survivability and just all-in potential by a lot. And it's generally going to be reduced by 3 seconds at all ranks, so of course this is going to be a really good change for Samira. It's going to make her a lot stronger. Now Vladimir, pretty interesting here. His base regen on his W is going up by 10, but his damage ratio to monsters is now going down by 80%. This is really strange because they said he's weak in the Baron lane and strong in the jungle, so they're trying to make his Baron lane stronger by giving him more health regen, but at the same time, why are they nerfing him in the jungle, like his clear speed in the jungle? That's really weird, but anyways, they are nerfing him in the jungle. So, Zoe. Zoe is, in my opinion, the best mid laner at the moment. And if you're a good Zoe, you can just destroy enemy teams. But anyways, what changes are they giving her? Well, basically, first up is her Her Q base damage is going down by 10 at all ranks. Step in the right direction. Maximum base damage is going down as well by about 40 or so at all ranks, and her bubble getting lower base numbers, but her AP ratio is increased. So this is more targeted towards the early stages of the game, of course, and same goes for here. So of course, targeting the early stages of the game is very important because Zoe is a very snowballing champion. When you get a couple of kills, you get items and you start snowballing the game. So targeting her early game, I think, is good, and I think that giving her higher AP ratios to compensate later is fair. So this should bring Zoe down a notch and make it a little bit harder for her to get kills in early stages of the game to prevent her from snowballing too badly. Yeah. So next up, item changes. Gluttonous Greaves, getting a 580 buff, of course, because these are probably the least popular boots. Boots of Mana, of course, obviously are the best, and depending on who you are, Boots of Mana are generally the best boots. Defensive boots are really strong as well. Also, the Berserker Greaves are very strong as well, and Gluttonous Greaves generally are the worst ones, so this is a good buff. Boots of Mana, AP is going down by 5, and base mana regen is going down by 50%. Now this looks like pretty huge nerfs, but in reality, what you get for like the goal you're spending on Boots of Mana is so much anyway. So I think that like they say here, we're adjusting the stats they provide you, but we still think these stats provide a lot for the cause. I agree. I still think for like, I think it's 1400 gold, getting like 55 AP, 150 mana regen, and 8 magic pen is still an absurd amount. So I still think that these boots are going to be OP, just less so. Plated steel caps is now going to reduce physical damage by 12 instead of 15%, because they have been really strong against like assassins, for instance. Yeah, they have been really strong against them, so this does kind of make sense. So there's a new ghost pearl mechanic that when your inner turret is destroyed, I'm assuming that, I'm not sure if they by inner turret they mean inhibitor or they mean like this tier 2 tower, but either way, when one of those towers is destroyed, a ghost power will spawn in the jungle and like kind of walk around to provide vision, and when enemies are spotted, they will have an eye above their head to indicate as such. So this is a pretty nice change for teams who are behind. I don't know if it was a necessary change, but it's just a new mechanic added to the game where if you're behind, you know sometimes you can't even leave your base to ward. So this is gonna help out, but at the same time, it's pretty easy to play around because I think it's gonna be a little bit something like Callista's Sentinels in LoL PC. Basically, it's just gonna move in like about a fixed route, and it's not gonna go too fast. So unless you are sloppy and you just run straight into the jungle and get spotted by it, normally you are able to play around it, so it generally should not be too big of a deal. So regardless, that is it for the patch rundown. So thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.